I stood in the ballroom holding my late wife's necklace, the last reminder of her love, which I had given to my daughter Emily as a wedding gift. My brother-in-law, Trevor, with a disdainful smile, said, "What is this cheap junk?" The guests froze and I felt my heart clench with betrayal. He didn't know that I was planning to give them an apartment in the center of New York, but his words awakened something dark in me. I decided that justice would be mine and it would be crushing. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. The ballroom glittered like a chandelier caught in a storm of light. Crystal droplets hung from the ceiling, casting fractured rainbows across the marble floor. I stood at the head table, my fingers brushing the velvet box in my pocket. The weight of it grounded me a tether to her, my late wife Margaret, whose love still lingered in the diamonds. I was about to give our daughter Emily. The room buzzed with chatter, glasses clinking, the elite of Manhattan swirling in their tailored suits and silk gowns. I cleared my throat and the noise dimmed. All eyes turned to me. "Tonight," I began, my voice steady, despite the knot in my chest. "We celebrate Emily and Trevor, my daughter, my pride." I looked at Emily, radiant in her white dress. Her eyes fixed somewhere past me. "This is for you, sweetheart." I opened the box, revealing the necklace, a cascade of diamonds that caught the light like stars. "It was your mother's, her love, now yours." The room sighed a collective breath of awe. I stepped toward Emily, the necklace dangling from my fingers. Then Trevor, my new son-in-law, leaned forward, his lips curling into a smirk. "What's this, Henry? Some cheap trinket from a pawn shop?" His voice cut through the hush. Sharp and mocking. Laughter rippled from a few guests, quickly stifled. My hand froze midair. The diamonds trembled. I looked at Emily, waiting for her to speak, to defend the gift, to defend me. She stared at the table, her fingers twisting the edge of her napkin. Silence. My chest tightened as if the air had turned to glass. Trevor waved a dismissive hand, knocking the velvet box from my grasp. It hit the table with a dull thud, the necklace spilling out its stones, glinting like tears on the cloth. "Really, Henry," Trevor drawled loud enough for the room to hear. "You could have at least sprung for something new." More laughter, bolder. "Now." My face burned, not from shame but from a rage I hadn't felt in years. I'd planned to announce the apartment, a penthouse on the Upper East Side, my wedding gift to them. But Trevor's words? His sneer, woke something cold and deliberate inside me. I straightened, forcing a smile. "Enjoy the evening," I said. My voice calm, betraying nothing. I turned, ignoring the pitying glances, the whispers trailing me like shadows. The marble floor echoed under my steps. As I crossed the ballroom, each one heavier than the last, I pushed through the double doors, the cool night air hitting my face like a slap in the car. I gripped the steering wheel, the city blurring past, neon signs, honking taxis, a world that didn't care. The necklace wasn't just a gift, it was Margaret's heart, the last piece of her I could give. Emily's silence hurt more than Trevor's cruelty. How had I misjudged them so badly? The question nodded at me, sharp and relentless, as the lights of Manhattan faded behind me. The old house in Brooklyn creaked under the weight of its memories. I sat in a worn leather armchair, the kind Margaret used to curl up in, with a book. A single lamp cast a warm glow, softening the edges of the room. The air smelled of aged wood and faint traces of coffee, a scent that hadn't changed in 15 years. In my hands was a photograph, Margaret and Emily laughing in the garden. Their hair tangled with sunlight. I traced the faded edge, my thumb lingering on Emily's smile. That night in the ballroom still burned in my mind. Trevor's sneer, Emily's averted eyes. They'd carved a wound I couldn't ignore. I set the photo down and opened the album on the coffee table. Each page was a stitch in the tapestry of my sacrifices. Emily at 6, her tiny hand clutching mine as we walked to school. Her mother's absence, a shadow between us. I'd worked late nights on Wall Street trading sleep for deals, to pay for her private school, her tutors, her dreams. I remembered her at 10 o'clock scribbling a card for Father's Day, her tongue poking out in concentration. "You're my hero, Daddy." She'd written. The letters, uneven but bold. I found that card in a drawer. The paper creased, the ink faded, my chest ached. Where had that girl gone? At 20, she'd called from college, her voice bright, asking for help with tuition. I'd sent the money, no questions asked, selling a chunk of my investments to cover it. She'd promised to visit, but the calls grew shorter, her excuses sharper. Then came Trevor. I flipped to a photo of Emily. At 28, her arm looped through his at a gala. Her smile was different, polished, distant. She stopped returning my calls, her texts brief and cold. "Busy with Trevor," she'd say, as if I were an afterthought. I told myself it was just a phase, that she'd come back to me. But in the ballroom, when she let Trevor mock her mother's necklace, I saw the truth. I'd lost her. I stood pacing the room, the floorboards groaning under my weight. The house felt too small, its walls closing in with memories I couldn't escape. I stopped at the window, staring at the dark street. I'd given Emily everything, my time, my heart, my future. And for what, to be humiliated in front of strangers, my love tossed aside like trash. I slid the card back into the drawer, closing it with a soft click. The past was gone, and clinging to it would only weaken me. I caught my reflection in the mirror across the room, gray hair, tired eyes, but a spark of something new. Resolve. They thought they could break me, but they were wrong. I wouldn't let them destroy what I'd built, what I'd earned. Not Trevor, not even Emily. I straightened my jaw tight. It was time to fight back. The office on Wall Street hummed with quiet power. Glass walls framed a view of Manhattan's skyline, sharp and unyielding like the decision forming in my mind. I sat at my desk, a fortress of polished oak, surrounded by monitors flickering with numbers. The air smelled of fresh coffee and ink, a reminder of the deals I'd closed, the empire I'd built. But today my focus wasn't on profit, it was on justice. Trevor's voice echoed in my head, his mocking tone, the way he dismissed Margaret's necklace. Emily's silence was worse, a betrayal that cut deeper than words. I'd spent years forgiving her distance, excusing her choices, no more. I opened a drawer and pulled out a photo of her taken at her college graduation. Her smile was wide, unguarded. I stared at it for a moment, then slid it back, shutting the drawer. Sentiment wouldn't help me. Now I picked up the phone and dialed an old friend, Jack, a man who knew the underbelly of this city's financial world. "Jack," I said when he answered, "I need information on Trevor Cunningham, his deals, his partners, his weaknesses." Jack chuckled, unsurprised. "Give me a few days, Henry, you sure about this?" I paused, my grip tightening on the receiver. "I've never been more sure." Hanging up, I turned to a stack of reports on my desk. Trevor's name appeared in a few, his latest ventures, risky bets on volatile markets. His ambition was his strength, but also his Achilles heel. I grabbed a pen, underlining names of his key investors, men I'd known for decades, men who owed me favors. My pulse steadied, a calm settling over me. This was my domain, and Trevor was about to learn what it meant to cross me. I opened a notebook, jotting down a plan. First I'd map his network, every deal, every handshake. Then I'd find the cracks, the leverage points, a missed payment here, a whispered doubt there. I'd built my career on precision, and this would be my masterpiece. My pen moved faster, the ink bold against the page. I allowed myself a small smile. Trevor thought he was untouchable. He'd soon regret that arrogance. Standing, I walked to the window. The city sprawling below. The chaos of Manhattan felt distant, irrelevant. For the first time in days I was in control. I gathered a file documents names, a blueprint of Trevor's world and tucked it under my arm as I left the office. The weight of the folder was a promise Trevor would pay and Emily would see the cost of her choices. I stepped into the elevator, my reflection sharp in the polished doors. This was only the beginning. The cafe on Manhattan's Lower East Side was a cramped haven of chipped mugs and steamed-up windows. I sat in a corner booth, the leather seat creaking under me as the scent of burnt coffee mingled with the damp chill from the street. Across the table, a private investigator named Carl slid a worn briefcase onto the table. His fingers, stained with nicotine, unlatched it with a click. "You wanted dirt on Cunningham," he said, his voice low growly. "Here it is." I opened the folder. He handed me pages of financial records, emails and grainy photos spilled out, each marked with red ink accusations of shady deals, unreported losses and whispers of fraud. Trevor's ambition had led him to risky ventures, bets that could collapse with one wrong move. My eyes lingered on a photo, Trevor shaking hands with a man I recognized, a hedge fund shark known for cutting ties at the first sign of trouble. "He's overextended," Carl said, tapping the page. "One push and he's done." I nodded, my pulse quickening. This was the key I'd been searching for. But as I scanned the documents, a line caught my eye, an email where Trevor dismissed Emily's concerns about their finances. "Don't worry, darling." He'd written, "Your father's money will always bail us out." My stomach twisted, Emily, my daughter reduced to a pawn in his game. I closed the folder, my fingers tight around its edges. Trevor's arrogance would be his downfall, but Emily's complicity stung worse than I'd expected. Later that afternoon I stood outside their Upper East Side apartment. The doorman, nodding. As I entered, the elevator hummed, carrying me to their penthouse. Inside, the air was thick, with the scent of lilies and polish, the kind of sterile luxury that screamed wealth but lacked warmth. Gilded mirrors lined the walls, reflecting the cold marble floors. Emily greeted me with a strange smile, her fingers fidgeting with a bracelet. Trevor lounged on a velvet sofa, a glass of whiskey in hand. "Henry," he said, his tone dripping with mock warmth. "Always a pleasure." I'd come under the guise of a family visit, but my eyes were sharp, cataloging every detail. Trevor's casual arrogance. His arms slung over the sofa. His dismissive chuckle when I mentioned the wedding confirmed the report's truth. Emily was quieter, her gaze darting between us. "How's work, Dad?" she asked, her voice thin. I smiled, keeping my tone light, busy as always, but my attention snagged on a drawer half open beside her. Inside I glimpsed the velvet box from the wedding, the necklace, Margaret's necklace, tossed aside like forgotten trinkets. My chest tightened, but I kept my face neutral. Trevor rambled about a new deal. His words laced with bravado. "You wouldn't understand, Henry. Old school finance is dead." I nodded, letting him talk each word, a shovel digging his own grave. Emily excused herself to the kitchen and I followed, offering to help as she fussed with a coffee maker. I saw the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands trembled. "Everything okay?" I asked softly. She nodded too quickly, avoiding my eyes. "Fine, Dad, just busy back in the living room." Trevor's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his jaw tightening, and I knew Carl's report was just the beginning. I left soon after the folders weighed heavy. In my briefcase in the car I pulled out a single sheet, a list of Trevor's investors' names. I could sway with a phone call. The city blurred past its lights sharp against the dusk. Trevor had built his empire on sand and I was ready to shake the ground beneath him. My office on Wall Street was a fortress of glass and steel. Its silence broken only by the soft hum of my computer. The skyline glittered beyond the window, a reminder of the stakes I'd played for decades. Tonight it was my battlefield. I opened the encrypted email draft, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat. The file attached was a dagger. Carl's report stripped of its source, detailing Trevor's financial missteps. One click and it would land in the inboxes of his bank's board. My finger hovered over the mouse. This was it? No turning back. I thought of Emily, her nervous smile in the apartment, the necklace hidden in that drawer. She'd be caught in a fallout and the thought gnawed at me. But she'd chosen Trevor, chosen his world over mine. I couldn't save her from herself, not anymore. I clicked. Send the sound. Sharp in the quiet. The email vanished into the ether, a silent missile aimed at Trevor's career. I leaned back, my pulse steady. A strange calm, settling over me across town in Trevor's sleek office. The consequences were already unfolding. I'd learned from Jack that the board had called an emergency meeting. Trevor sat at his desk, papers scattered like fallen leaves. His tie loosened. His boss, a gray-haired titan named Harrove, tossed a printed copy of the report onto the desk. "Explain this, Cunningham," he barked. Trevor's face flushed, his voice, rising. "It's nonsense, someone's framing me." But Harrove's eyes were cold. His trust eroded Trevor's charm. His usual weapon faltered under the weight of those red-marked pages. In their apartment, Emily paced her phone, pressed to her ear. I could imagine her voice sharp with worry as she spoke to Trevor. "You said everything was fine," she snapped, her words echoing through the marble-walled living room. Trevor's reply was clipped, defensive. "It is fine, Emily, just stay out of it." She hung up her hands, shaking the ring on her finger, catching the light. She didn't know the email came from me, but I wondered if she'd suspect. The thought stung. But I pushed it aside. Back in my office I refreshed a news site. A headline flickered. Cunningham Group faces internal review. It was small, buried in the financial section, but it was enough. The first crack in Trevor's facade. I closed my laptop with a soft snap. The sound final like a door locking. My reflection stared back from the dark screen. Older, harder but alive with purpose. I'd drawn first blood and it felt good. Too good, maybe. My phone buzzed, a text from Jack, boards digging deeper, Trevor's on thin ice. I allowed myself a small smile. The city hummed below, its rhythm, matching the pulse of my plan. But as I gathered my things to leave, a question lingered: how far would I go to see this through? I pushed it down, focusing on the next step. Trevor and Emily had no idea what was coming, and I intended to keep it that way. The restaurant on Manhattan's Upper West Side was a cocoon of dim lights and clinking glasses. Its air heavy with the scent of truffles and wine. I sat across from Trevor and Emily. The white tablecloth pristine between us, a fragile barrier against the tension crackling in the air. Trevor's fork tapped rhythmically against his plate. His eyes narrowed as he studied me. Emily twisted her wedding ring, her gaze flickering to the other diners as if seeking an escape. This family dinner, meant to smooth things over, was anything, but Trevor leaned forward, his voice low but sharp. "You've been awfully quiet, Henry, not meddling in things that don't concern you." I hope his words were a jab laced with suspicion. I sipped my water, letting the ice clink against the glass. My face a mask of calm. "I'm just here for dinner, Trevor," I said evenly, but my mind raced, cataloging his every move, the sweat beading at his temple, the way his smile didn't reach his eyes. Emily cut in. Her voice strained. "Dad, Trevor's just stressed. Work's been tough." She glanced at him seeking approval, but Trevor waved her off. "Don't make excuses for me, darling. Your father knows how the game is played." He turned back to me, his tone hardening. "Or maybe he doesn't. Old dogs, new tricks, right?" A few nearby diners glanced over, sensing the edge in his voice. My grip tightened on my napkin, but I kept my smile. "You're under pressure." I said, my words deliberate. "It shows." Trevor's fork stopped midair, his eyes flashing. "What's that supposed to mean?" he snapped. Emily reached for his arm, whispering, "Trevor, please," but he shook her off, leaning closer. "If you've got something to say, Henry, spit it out, or are you just stirring the pot?" Like always, I held his gaze, my voice steady. "Careful, Trevor. Accusations can cut both ways." The restaurant seemed to quiet, the clatter of dishes fading as our table became its own battlefield. Emily's face palled, her fingers still on her ring. "Dad, don't," she said softly. But her words lacked conviction. She was defending him even now, and it hurt more than I'd admit. But it also fueled me. They thought they could bully me into silence. They were wrong. I set my napkin on the table. The motion deliberate, final. "I think we're done here," I said, standing. Trevor scoffed, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. Emily started to speak, then stopped, her lips trembling. I walked out the restaurant's warmth, giving way to the cool night air. The city pulsed around me, its lights sharp and relentless, matching the clarity. In my mind, Trevor's accusations meant he was rattled good, but Emily's loyalty to him was a wound I hadn't expected to reopen. I paused on the sidewalk, glancing back at the restaurant's glowing windows. They were still at the table, their heads bent together, arguing or conspiring. It didn't matter. I'd started this and I'd see it through. The next move would hit harder, cut deeper. I turned and walked into the night, the weight of my resolve heavier than ever. They'd pushed me too far, and now they'd learn what that cost. The conference room on Wall Street gleamed with the sheen of power, mahogany table polished to a mirror's edge floor, toe-ceiling windows framing Manhattan's jagged skyline. I stood at the head, my hands steady, as I opened a slim folder. Across from me sat three of Trevor's key investors. Their faces, a mix of skepticism and unease. The air hummed with the faint tick of a wall clock. Each second, a reminder of the stakes. "Gentlemen," I began, my voice calm but firm. "Let's talk about Trevor Cunningham's latest venture." I slid a report across the table. Its pages marked with discrepancies, overstated profits, hidden losses, deals teetering on collapse. The investors leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Cunningham's numbers don't add up," I said, pointing to a graph. "He's betting on borrowed time and your money's on the line." One of them, a silver-haired man named Ellison, frowned. "He's always been ambitious," he said, but his tone wavered. I smiled thinly. "Ambition isn't enough. When the foundation's crumbling." The room grew quiet, the weight of my words settling like dust. I didn't mention Trevor's name again, letting the number speak. By the time I closed the folder, two of them had agreed to pull out. Ellison hesitated, then nodded. "Well, review our position," he said. But I knew I'd won. As they left, I felt a surge of cold satisfaction. Trevor's empire was fraying and I was pulling the threads. Later that afternoon I sat in a notary's office, a cramped space filled with the scent of ink and old paper. The notary, a wiry woman with sharp eyes, slid a document toward me. "This transfers the Upper East Side apartment to a charitable trust," she said. "The proceeds will fund a women's shelter, as you requested." I nodded, my pen hovering over the signature line. The apartment was meant to be Emily and Trevor's wedding gift, a symbol of my love. Now it would be their lesson. I signed with a single, deliberate stroke, the pen scratched loud in the silence. Emily's face flashed in my mind, her nervous smile the way she'd hidden Margaret's necklace. Could I really do this to her? The question lingered, but I pushed it aside. She'd chosen Trevor's world, his values. This was justice, not cruelty. The notary stamped the document and I felt a weight lift, replaced by a steely resolve. Back in my office I checked my email. A message from Ellison confirmed it. They'd withdrawn from Trevor's deal. I leaned back. The city's hum, a distant pulse beyond the glass. The plan was working, but it wasn't enough. Trevor's fall had to be total and Emily needed to see the cost of her choices. I tucked the notarized document into a drawer. Its edges crisp against my fingers. As I stepped into the elevator, the doors closing with a soft thud. I thought they've lost more than they know and they're about to feel it. Trevor's office was a war zone of scattered papers and flickering screens. The once pristine desk was buried under reports, coffee cups and a half-empty bottle of antisets. The air wire of sweat and desperation, the kind that clings to a man watching his world unravel. He sat, hunched over his laptop, the glow illuminating his bloodshot eyes. An email from his boss glared on the screen. Your position is terminated. Effective immediately. Investors have withdrawn. Trevor's hand shook as he slammed the laptop shut. He grabbed his phone, dialing Ellison. What is this? He shouted, his voice cracking. You can't just pull out. Ellison's reply was clipped. Final. The numbers don't lie. Cunningham. We're done. Trevor hurled the phone across the room. It hit the wall with a crack, the screen splintering. His chest heaved, his tie asked you as he paced the office like a caged animal, someone's behind this? He muttered, someone's playing me. Across town, in their Upper East Side apartment, Emily stood in the kitchen, the clatter of dishes, masking her rising panic. She'd heard Trevor's call, his voice echoing through the penthouse. When he stormed in, his face a mask of rage, she froze. They've cut me loose. He spat, tossing his jacket onto the counter. Years of work gone. Emily's hands trembled as she set down a plate. You said the deal was solid. She said, her voice sharp. You promised we were safe. Trevor rounded on her, his eyes blazing. Don't start, Emily, I'm handling it. But his words rang hollow and she stepped back, her ring, catching the light. Handling it. She snapped. We're drowning, Trevor. What did you do? He turned away, muttering about enemies, conspiracies. Emily's stomach churned. For the first time she saw him not as her protector but as a liability. I sat in my Brooklyn home, the old armchair creaking under me, a tablet balanced on my knee. A news alert flashed. Cunningham Group collapses amid investor exodus. I read it twice, savoring the words. Trevor's empire was in ruins. Just as I planned, my fingers brushed the edge of a photo on the table. Emily as a child, laughing in my arms. The victory felt sharp, but it cut both ways. She was hurting and part of me ached for her. Yet she'd made her choice. I closed the tablet, the screen going dark. Trevor's fall was spectacular, but it was only the beginning. Emily still clung to him, blind to the truth. The next step would hit closer. Force her to see what she'd lost. I stood, the house quiet around me, its familiar creaks of comfort. The city waited outside its lights, beckoning. I had one more move to make and it would change everything. The morning was gray, Manhattan skyline muted behind a veil of clouds. I stood in my office. The phone pressed to my ear as I finalized the delivery. Make sure the letter reaches Emily Cunningham by noon. I told the courier service, my voice steady. It's urgent. The notarized document, sealed in a thick envelope with a wax stamp, was my final gift to her. Not the apartment she'd expected, but a lesson in consequences. The proceeds from its sale now funded a shelter in Margaret's name. Emily needed to know. I hung up, my fingers tracing the edge of my desk. The decision to sell the apartment had been cold, calculated, but it carried a sting. Emily's face at the wedding. Her silence as Trevor mocked the necklace flashed in my mind. She'd chosen him, but she was still my daughter. Could I forgive her? The question lingered unanswered as I watched the city pulse below. In their apartment, Emily answered the door. Her hair pulled back, eyes tired. The courier handed her the envelope, its weight. Surprising her, she tore it open, the wax seal crumbling under her fingers. The letter inside was formal, stark. The apartment, her dream home, had been sold. The funds were gone, donated to charity. Her breath caught the paper trembling in her hands. "No," she whispered, sinking onto a chair. The room felt smaller, the gilded mirrors mocking her. She called Trevor, her voice shaking. "Dad sold the apartment." She said the words choking her. "It's gone, Trevor, all of it." He stood across the room, surrounded by half-packed boxes, their belongings spilling out like a wound. "Your father," he sneered, tossing a shirt into a suitcase, always pulling strings. But his bravado was thin, his hands unsteady. Emily clutched the letter, her eyes burning. "This is your fault," she said. Her voice low, fierce. "You pushed him too far." Trevor turned away silent, and Emily felt the ground shift beneath her. The apartment, their status, their future. It was slipping away. She stared at the letter, her father's signature sharp against the page. She'd ignored his love, dismissed his sacrifices, and now she was paying the price. The realization was a blade cutting deep. I sat in my office. A news alert on my phone. Cunningham couple faces, eviction amid financial ruin. The words were cold, final, but they didn't bring the joy I'd expected. Emily's pain was real and it mirrored my own. Yet justice demanded balance and I'd given it. I stood gathering my coat, the weight of my choices heavy. They'd come to me soon, broken, desperate. But would I listen? The question hung in the air as I stepped into the elevator, the doors closing like a curtain on the past. The Brooklyn house stood quiet, under the weight of dusk, its weathered brick glowing faintly in the fading light. I was in the living room, the old lamp casting a soft halo over the worn rug. When the doorbell rang, its chime cut through the silence, sharp and unwelcome. I knew who it was before I opened the door. Trevor and Emily stood on the stoop, their faces gaunt, their clothes rumpled as if they'd been worn too long. The city's hum was distant, leaving only their ragged breathing to fill the space. "Henry," Trevor started, his voice stripped of its usual swagger. "We need to talk." Emily clutched his arm. Her eyes red, her cheeks streaked with tears. I stepped aside, letting them in my expression unreadable. The air grew heavy as they shuffled into the room. Their desperation, a palpable thing. I gestured to the couch, but they stood shifting like cornered animals. "We've lost everything," Trevor said, his hands clenching, "the apartment, my job, our savings gone." He forced a weak smile, as if charm could still save him. "You've got the means, Henry, help us please." His words were a plea, but they carried a trace of entitlement. As if I owed him salvation, I leaned against the armchair. My arms crossed silent. Emily stepped forward, her voice breaking, "Dad, I'm so sorry." She sank to her knees, her hands trembling. "I didn't mean for this. I should have stood up for you for Mom's necklace. Please don't turn us away." Her sobs echoed in the room, each one a knife to my chest. I saw the little girl who'd once clung to me, but I also saw the woman who'd chosen Trevor's world over mine. I straightened my voice, steady, cold. "You made your choices, both of you." Trevor mocked what mattered most. "You, Emily, stood by and let him." Her head dropped, her shoulders shaking. Trevor opened his mouth, but I raised a hand. "No more excuses. You built this ruin. Live in it." The words were heavy, final, like stones dropping into a still pond. I turned toward the door. My steps deliberate. "Leave," I said, pulling it open. The night air rushed in cool and sharp. Trevor's face twisted a mix of anger and defeat, but he took Emily's arm guiding her out. She looked back, her eyes pleading, but I held firm. The door closed with a soft thud, the sound reverberating in my chest. I stood alone. The lamp's glow, flickering outside. I stepped onto the porch. The stars faint above the city's glow. The weight of their pleas lingered, but so did the clarity of my resolve. I torn down their world, just as they tried to tear down mine. Justice was served, but the cost was real. As I gazed at the sky, a question stirred: what now? The answer wasn't clear, but the night seemed to hold a promise, one I wasn't ready to name. The office on Wall Street was bathed in morning light, the sun slicing through the glass walls to warm the polished oak desk. I sat with a stack of documents before me. Their pages crisp, their purpose clear. The lawyer across from me, a woman with a no-nonsense gaze, slid a pen my way. "This establishes the Margaret Wilson Foundation," she said, her voice brisk. "Your donation will fund shelters and scholarships for years." I nodded, the weight of the moment settling over me like a mantle. I signed each page. The pen's scratch a quiet rhythm. The sum was substantial, millions carved from my fortune, a fortune I'd once dreamed of passing to Emily. But this felt right, a way to honor Margaret's love, her strength. The foundation would carry her name, a beacon for those in need, a legacy untouched by Trevor's greed or Emily's betrayal. My hand paused on the final signature. A flicker of doubt surfacing. Was this enough to close the wound? The lawyer gathered the papers. Her smile, professional but warm. "Margaret would be proud," she said, and I felt a lump in my throat. I glanced at the photo on my desk. Margaret and Emily laughing in a garden long ago. The frame was worn, the glass smudged from years of touch. I picked it up, my thumb brushing Margaret's face. She would. I murmured the words more for myself than the lawyer. I stood slipping the photo into my pocket. The gesture felt final, a promise to carry her with me, not as a burden but as a light. My phone buzzed, a confirmation from the foundation's director thanking me for the transfer. I skimmed it, my chest loosening. The city sparkled beyond the window, its chaos softened by the morning's glow. For the first time in months, I felt unmed, free. As I gathered my things, my fingers brushed an envelope in my coat pocket. Emily's handwriting stared back. The letter unopened, delivered days ago. I hadn't read it, hadn't wanted to her. Apologies, her regrets. They couldn't undo the past. Yet the weight of it tugged at me, a reminder of the girl she'd been. I left the office, the envelope still in my pocket. My steps light but purposeful. The city waited and I had one last place to go. One last truth to face. The cemetery was a quiet sea of stone, the air thick, with the scent of damp earth and fallen leaves. I stood before Margaret's grave, the granite cool under my fingers as I traced her name. The replica of her necklace rested in my palm, its diamonds catching the gray light of the overcast sky. I'd had it made after the wedding, a way to keep her close, without clinging to the original, now lost to Emily's indifference. This moment was for us, for the love we'd built. "Margaret," I said softly, kneeling. "I did it. I protected what we had." My voice was steady, but my chest ached. "Trevor's gone, his empire dust. Emily, she's learning, but it's not enough." I paused, the wind, stirring the leaves at my feet. "You always said to stand tall, to fight for what's right. I hope I made you proud." The words felt like a prayer, a release. I set the necklace on the grave, its stones glinting against the stone. It was a farewell, not to Margaret's memory but to the pain I'd carried. The act was simple, but it freed something deep within me. I straightened, my gaze lingering on the headstone. The years we'd shared, the laughter, the quiet nights. They were untouched by the chaos of these months. That was my victory. My hand slipped into my pocket, brushing the unopened letter from Emily. I pulled it out. The paper creased, her handwriting, a ghost of the child she'd been part of. Me wanted to read it, to hear her voice, her regrets. But I didn't need her words to know the truth. She'd chosen her path and I'd chosen mine. I tucked the letter back unopened, a silent refusal to let her pain tether me again. I turned walking down the path, the crunch of gravel under my shoes, a steady rhythm. The cemetery faded behind me, its silence giving way to the distant hum of the city. I felt lighter each step, a shedding of the anger, the betrayal, the need for vengeance. Justice had been served not with cruelty but with purpose. Margaret's love, her strength, lived on in the foundation in me. As I reached the gate, I glanced back. The necklace, a faint spark against the stone. Life's just beginning. I thought the words unvoiced but certain. The sky was clearing, a sliver of blue breaking through. I stepped into the world beyond, ready for whatever came next. My heart finally at peace. If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.